Welcome aboard, everyone else who's joining. Let me get settled here a little bit. I have props for this one. I'm breaking out the whiteboard again. Before I get into that, I just wanted to plug the Calvin Festival of Faith and Writing. Here I am in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's a conference that goes every other year here. And it seems like a lot of people in my feed would be interested in it. There are some cool workshops. They bring in some interesting writers. They have really good bookseller tables. So if you find yourself in Grand Rapids, Michigan, anytime really, but if you're coming in April for that conference, reach out, let me know. Don't be a stranger. Um, and yeah, if there's enough of us, maybe we can put together like a Substack group and meet up and get to know each other a little bit more in person. In addition to that, I have kind of a cool unboxing. Some of you have seen that I discovered, I think it's either Fritz Ehrenberg or Fritz Eichenberg. He did these really good illustrations of Dostoevsky's major novels through Heritage Press. So I have this one, which has been making the rounds on Substack and has this nice illustration on the cover. On the inside, it has these really cool, like, designs on all the chapter titles. But I really got it for these illustrations. Those of you who've been following the vlog have seen that I've been getting back into drawing, but he just has these very dramatic, like, wood cuts or pen and ink lithographs or something. So I got that one. I gave you a sneak peek of that on my Substack, but I decided to go through and just get all of them. So I have the idiot here. I have the demons or possessed. And then, of course, I have crime and punishment. So if we do these on a reading, like a read along in the future, I'll definitely be featuring more of these engravings because they are just really dramatic and really great. So if there's another Dostoevsky novel that's just been bugging you that you haven't read yet, let me know. I definitely want to do another one of these. He's one of my favorite authors. And this has been a really great chance to work through these big books with a group of people. Some people from Africa, some people from Hawaii, people from all over. So it's been really cool to read with you all. And so I'd love to do one of those maybe next winter. But before then, I want to kind of tease other books I've been thinking about doing as a read along. So with Dostoevsky, another like big guy in philosophy around this time who's really got some interesting challenges for the modern world and also a really great writer and someone to sink your teeth into is Nietzsche. And so after we wrap up with the Brothers Karamazov, which is a nice big book and there's a lot going on, I thought we would do Nietzsche's Also sprach Zarathustra, or Thus Spake Zarathustra. So if you've been wanting to read Nietzsche, this is a great way to get into it. He's a very sympathetic character. He's got a lot of great ideas. It's really life affirming. People, call him a nihilist and know how depressed he was and all this kind of stuff. But inside of Zarathustra, it's a surprisingly uplifting book. I've been really enjoying it. And so I thought that would be a good follow after we do the Brothers Karamazov to try that. And we'd only do that for a month or so. It's not a very big book. Inside of here comes out to 200, 300 pages or something like that. But after, such a large Russian novel, this will be a good palate cleanser. The other book that a lot of people have been talking about on Substack, and it's been on my to read list for a long time. So I really want to do that for our summer read on here, would be George Eliot's Middlemarch. So is this on anyone else's to read list? The thing I love about her is she's kind of like the Jane Austen for philosophers. She does a lot of philosophical quotes. She translated Spinoza into English, his Ethics. There's a lot of really interesting philosophical dialogue and sound bites in this story. So I thought that would make a great summer read. So that's what I'm thinking about doing for that. And then finally, um, this I saw that this companion book just came out for one of my favorite novels, Till We Have Faces, by C.S. Lewis. And this is from Peter Kraft, who is one of my professors. And so after doing yet another big read during the summer, I thought we'd follow that up with Till We Have Faces, which is a very slim book, but a very deep one. And this has some really great internal psychology, a lot of good philosophizing about wrestling with God, wrestling with grief, um, how people choose to live their lives, whether or not you approve of how your family members are living their lives, and how you might grow out of your smallness or something like that. So that's the other one that I'm thinking about for the fall after we get those reads done. So that's kind of the lay of the land for the next couple months around here. I'll be putting out a announcement about the next book club, but for the time being, we are still in the middle of Dostoevsky. In fact, we just got on the other side of the middle right here. And so this is where the prop comes in. Maybe some of you have already read my essay where I talk about the mountain of Dostoevsky, or the mountain of the brothers Karamazov, rather. So here, let me move the camera a little bit here. It's a big whiteboard. Might not be able to. Here you go. I'm my own production crew, so here we go. So where we've been so far, Dostoevsky has been going like this. We met the family, right? This was chapter 1, where we met a nice little family. And then we had an unfortunate gathering at the monastery, which kind of operated like a courtroom. And from there, we moved up to strains and the sensualist chapters. And on that level, we saw that Dmitri had this drunken confession that he did 3 times to Alyosha. And then he also had this love triangle going on. Katya was dependent upon him. The love triangle is, of course, with Katya, Ivan, Dmitri, and then also the love triangle between Dmitri and Grushenka and all of that, and Fyodor, his dad. Then, so let's see, we got chapter 1, chapter 2, chapters 3 and 4. Then we get to chapter 5, which was, Ivan, who was having these evil conversations. He was having conversations about evil. And here where we have the Grand Inquisitor, here we have rebellion. So Ivan's having these evil conversations in this pro and contra chapter. Then we come up to the life of the Russian monk, chapter 6. And then something interesting happens at the end of that, namely that Father Zosima dies. So that's where we left off, right? So we have the death of a spiritual father here. We have the death of a father, some evil conversations, a love triangle. Katya is dependent on Dmitri. Dmitri tries to confess something 3 times. There's a courtroom kind of scene at the monastery, and we have a nice little family. Now, I want you to really think about this pattern, because where we are right now starting this conversation with Alyosha, this is really the summit of the mountain. This is where we have a pivot point in Alyosha's story. And the way I think about it is, from this movement on, everything goes downhill. Everything follows down. Things happen very quickly, very rapidly. But I want you to keep how we went up in mind, because as we come down, they're going to start to mirror the things that happened on the way up. So, for instance, just give you an example. After Alyosha, has his moment and his change, Then what do we have? We have the death of his father that happens right after that. Then we have some evil conversations that we'll get into another time. This doesn't follow in exactly a chapter to chapter order, but all of these events that happen over here are mirrored over here. And I'll be pointing those out along the way. Um, but for right now, let's just get into Alyosha and what's going on there. All right. So, what do we have with Alyosha? Well, his story begins where Father Zosima's ends. We have the chapter called The Odor of Corruption. And for those of you, maybe not in the know, um, in Orthodoxy, oftentimes there's this notion that a holy person, their body will be incorrupt. That there are some people, uh, like, for instance, I've been in Mount Athos and I've kissed John the Baptist's arm, and that was bones. Um, I have kissed, yeah, Saint George, his as well, and then there was also the head of um, Saint John Chrysostom, who wrote the Divine Liturgy. And the interesting thing about his skull is that his ear is still intact. It still looks like a human ear, and he's been dead for 900 years or so. And they say it's because that was the ear that the angel spoke into and gave him the words to the Divine Liturgy. Other famous saints are, I believe, Saint Spiridon, who I think he's on Crete or something like that. Um, and his entire body is still incorrupt. And the interesting thing is they have to replace his shoes every couple of years because somehow his shoes get worn out, but his body does not. Um, so the kind of the devotional or the pious idea is that the saint is going to be preserved from corruption because his body, his soul, they're so wed together that his relics can be sources of healing. They can be sources of joy. Um, you're expected, well, you're not expected, but it's still a miracle. Um, that if you're a holy person, you're going to smell nice and you aren't going to decompose. And expectations were set very high for Father Zosima. And this chapter, this section that we're talking about here in part 3, it begins with his body smelling bad. And there's a lot of rumors around. People are mumbling. They're like, wait, why does the great saint, why does he smell? Why is he not living up to our expectations of what a saint should be? You have all of this mumbling happening. We see some parenthetical people saying that, oh, well, he was lax in his spirituality. He was, maybe too forgiving. They had too good of wine at the monastery. Maybe he wasn't as holy as we thought he was. And then comes in our friend, Father Farapon, who was the rival to Father Zosima in life. And he makes all of these mutterings like explicit. He points out that, no, I've been telling you this whole time, he was not a good spiritual leader. And this causes a scandal inside of the monastery, and it causes a scandal for Alyosha because he has to ask, why is my holy father, why is my spiritual father, why is this saintly man, how is it that he is, so corrupt, just like anyone else? And so when he's having kind of this little crisis of faith, um, in walks Rakuten, and who the career seminariist, depending on your translation. And Rakuten seeks to profit off of Alyosha's misfortune. Um, we find out that he is in cahoots with Grushenka, who wanted to bring Alyosha to her house so that she could, I don't know, woo him or something like this. And so she said, if you can get Alyosha to my house, I'll give you 25 rubles. And so he sneaks in, he finds Alyosha being sad. He's like, "Here, have a bit of sausage. Let's get a little vodka. Why don't we go over to Grushenka?" So he catches him at this opportune moment and takes him to her house in despair. And then that kind of sets up a new revelation of things about Grushenka. Because again, Grushenka has a little bit of reputation around town. She has every man around her finger. Every man is attracted to her. And Alyosha, is he going to be just another man, just as his spiritual father was just another man? Is he going to have a corrupt life, just as his spiritual father has a corrupt body? We're going to find out. So then they go to Grushenka's, and we have the chapter called The Onion. And in this section, this is one of my favorite parables from Dostoevsky. This is something to definitely take with you into your life, and to recall this parable all the time. So how do we get to this parable? Where does it come from? Well, first, Grushenka is excited to see this lovely Alyosha in her house. He's obviously the best of the Karamazovs she's been toying with. He's a bit of a prize. And so she sits on his lap and she's playing with his hair and, blowing kisses at him and wooing him and all of this. And then she finds out, why are you so sad? She's asking him, what's wrong? Why aren't you happy in this great situation? And then he says, it's because, his spiritual father died. And she immediately gets up and she crosses herself. And she's like, oh my, what am I doing? Like, I'm trying to woo and corrupt this like angelic novice. What's happening? And so she gets up, she crosses herself, and he, let's see here. Give this. Yes. Oh, there's this line in here where he says, Rakuten was watching her sitting on his lap carnivorously. I thought that was a nice little thing. There we go. There we go. So she says that she loves him and that she's not going to try and woo him or anything like this. And Alyosha realizes that she spared him, from his infidelity to his monastic vows, his infidelity, like she is also the cause of a love triangle between his brother and his dad. So he doesn't really want to get in the middle of this either. He's just in a despairing moment and it's comfortable. And so he thanks Grushenka, for her piety, for her, stopping this little charade, this little game. And then she says, like, I might be wicked, but I still gave an onion. And what does this mean? Well, she's referencing a peasant parable that apparently Dostoevsky heard. And I'll just read it here because it's a short little passage, but it's really great. Once upon a time, there was a woman, and she was as wicked could be, and she died, and not one good deed was left behind her. The devils took her and threw her into the lake of fire, and her guardian angel stood thinking, what good deed of hers can I remember to tell God? Then he remembered and said to God, once she pulled up an onion and gave it to a beggar woman. And God answered, now take that same onion, hold it up to her in the lake. Let her take hold of it and pull. And if you pull her out of the lake, she can go to paradise. But if the onion breaks, she has to stay where she is. And the angel ran to the woman, held out the onion to her. Here, woman, he said, take hold of it and pull. Then he began pulling carefully, and it almost pulled her all the way out. When other sinners in the lake saw her being pulled out, and all began holding on to her, so as to pull out with her. But the woman was wicked as wicked could be, and she began to kick them with her feet. It's me who's getting pulled out. It's me and not you. It's my onion and not yours. No sooner did she say that than the onion broke, and the woman fell back into the lake, and is burning there to this day. The angel wept and went away. So this parable that comes from Grushenka really taps into a spirituality of Dostoevsky that we've seen articulated through Father Zosima, that we can be responsible for the sins of all. and that we can take the sins of all unto ourselves, and that even the virtues of people we've never met can redeem us. The one little onion that an evil woman gave to a beggar one time might be enough to save everyone in that lake of fire, if that one person would be willing to not make it all about them, just for once. And in this parable, she didn't. She couldn't do that. All of her virtues had to stay her virtues. But if she would have just let her virtue be attributed to someone else, if it could have been for someone else's good, then everyone could have been better off for it. And then this is playing into Zosima's theme of to take the sins of all unto yourself, to be for all on behalf of all, as we say in the divine liturgy when the priest holds up the chalice, that this is on behalf of all and for all. And so here we see this really great parable coming from Grushenka. And sometimes it's just the littlest things that can make everyone's lives better. Conversely, it's just the littlest things that make the world worse for everyone. And then Alyosha, he's so moved by this story, and he really esteems her and says, thank you for sharing this story to me. I'm glad that we had this exchange, even though it might have been a little embarrassing. And like, thank you for sharing this. And then she's like, oh, don't say that, like, not me. And then Alyosha tags back and says, it was only an onion. His compliment was only an onion to her. And so here we have this nice little exchange between them, which shows that Grushenka might be more pious, and she might be more loving, and she might be more self-sacrificial than we're led to believe, than her reputation would have us believe. Even a reputation that she kind of conjured up for herself. And so I think that's adding some depth to her. And I think Dostoevsky does that really well. So let's see. Any questions on kind of that section before we move on into Cana of Galilee and all of that? Feel free to just write in the chat. Let me know where you're coming from. Let me know where you are in the book. Let me know if you have any questions. Throw them in no matter where I am in my talking, and I'll tie them up later. So when we come to the Cana of Galilee chapter, which is kind of really the turning point in Alyosha's life, he had this exchange with Grushenka that kind of got him out of his despair. That little onion kind of woke him up and said, wow, this world is really kind of beautiful. You never know where you're going to find these really great bits of wisdom. But he goes back to the monastery. And when an Orthodox person dies, you read the book of Psalms or you read the gospel over their body all night long. And so here we have him coming back, and he's just listening to Father Paisi doing the readings over Father Zosima's body. They open the windows because it smells bad. And so they're airing it out a little bit, but he's there and he's listening to what he's saying. And I think I think this is a really interesting little James Joyce kind of section, how James Joyce likes to take people's inner thoughts and their inner monologues and weave them with the conversations that are happening with them and outside of them. And so we have a really permeable barrier happening in here where the narrator just starts talking about how he comes into the elder's room and how the readings are going on. And then as the readings are going on, we see little thoughts of Alyosha's get woven in with them. And so we're going from the readings into Alyosha's head, and eventually the readings are working their way into Alyosha's mind. And then we come into this scene of a wedding feast. But I'll just say here, he began praying, but he soon felt that his praying was almost mechanical. Fragments of thoughts flashed in his soul, catching fire like little stars and dying out at once to give way to others. Yet there reigned in his soul something whole, firm, assuaging. and he was conscious of it himself. He would ardently begin a prayer. He wanted so much to give thanks and to love, but having begun the prayer, he would suddenly pass to something else, lapse into thought, forget both his prayer and what had interpreted it. He listened to what Father Paisi was reading and because he was very worn out, began to doze off little by little. And on the third day, there was a marriage in Cana of Galilee, read Father Paisi, and the mother of Jesus was there. Both Jesus was called and his disciples to the marriage. Marriage? What was that? Marriage swept like a whirlwind through Alyosha's mind. There is happiness for her, too. She went to the feast. No, she didn't take a knife. That was only a pathetic phrase. Well, one should forgive pathetic phrases. One must. Da, 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 da. So here we see, that James Joyce style of external words and internal thoughts, internal fragment monologues, bits about, did she have a knife in there? What's going on in my soul? It all gets blended together in this really kind of transcendent passage, um, where eventually the wedding feast in Cana turns into the marriage feast, um, that all are invited to, that Christ will have at the end of time, and that we all go to when we die. And here we see his father Zosima. And Father Zosima in this vision tells him, "We are rejoicing. We are drinking new wine, the wine of a new and great joy. See how many guests there are? Here are the bridegroom and the bride. Here is the wise ruler of the feast taking the new wine. Why are you marveling at me? I gave a little onion, and so I am here. And there are many here who gave only an onion, only one little onion. He became like us out of love, and he is rejoicing with us, transforming our water into wine, that the guest's joy may not end. He's waiting for new guests. He's ceaselessly calling new guests, now and unto ages of ages." So here we see that Grushenka's little onion also is woven into this grand narrative, that Alyosha needs for his life. He needs to be resolved with his spiritual father to know that he's safe now, even though he's no longer in his life. And so he's filled with this peace, knowing that Father Zosima's soul is whole, and that he just gave a little onion, and all the other people at the feast, they only gave a little onion. And he's so moved that he gets the consolation he needs, and he leaves Father Zosima's stinking body to go outside. And he's looking up at the skies, and he sees the freedom and the vastness and all of this in space and the stars. And it's just a really beautiful scene. And then it says, "The luxuriant autumn flowers in the flower beds near the house had fallen asleep until morning. The silence of the earth seemed to merge with the silence of heavens. The mystery of the earth touched the mystery of the stars. Alyosha stood gazing, and suddenly, as if he had been cut down, threw himself to the earth." And as we see here, another trope, people kissing the ground. Throughout Dostoevsky, keep your eyes peeled for whenever someone kisses the ground. This is them committing themselves not only to God in the heavens, but to everyone who is upon this earth. And here we see Alyosha is giving himself to this earth. He doesn't, there's a very carnal faith. There's a very earthly faith about Dostoevsky. It's not about escaping to some kind of heavens, but it's taking your place here and now. And if your life and your earth seems so dry, try watering it with your tears. That's the message of Zosima. That's the message of Father Zosima. That's the message of the church fathers, because often when you have an ascetic who is remembered, a monastic, it says you watered the earth with your tears. You watered the desert with your tears. And from the streams of your tears, you have brought forth much fruit. So the same thing that you see in Orthodox hagiography and Orthodox hymnography, all of that is woven into this story when someone like Alyosha kisses the earth and waters it with his tears. And of course, what is his commitment here? What is his, how does he sum up what is going on in his soul right now? He says He wanted to forgive everyone and for everything, and also to ask forgiveness, oh, not for himself, but for all and for everything, as others are asking for me, has rang again in his soul. So his love for this earth and his asking of forgiveness, he's not just asking forgiveness of the birds and the earth and the rocks and everything that never did anything wrong. All of it supports our life here on earth. He's asking forgiveness of that, but he's also asking forgiveness for all the other people like us who have yet to bow down to this earth and ask forgiveness of everyone in it, including the birds, including the fish, including the rocks and the wind. Everything here we should apologize for by ruining it through our sinful actions here on this earth. And while we might not be going outside and kissing the dirt with our own lips, Alyosha is trying to do that for us. So that is what he is doing. And that is what gives him the peace to move down the other side of the mountain. We went up to this pinnacle. We have this beautiful view of the sky. We have this beautiful view of the entire earth. Alyosha kisses the dirt. And now Alyosha and the whole story are about to descend down from that mountain. So then we move into the Mitya chapter where we learn more about Dmitri. All right, so Peyton, let's see, what do you have here? Dr. Jessica Hooten Wilson on YouTube points out that just as Alyosha's decisions make the world open up for him, the walls recede and the rooms expand, the opposite happens to other characters. They feel closed in and trapped. Yeah, that's that's a little bit more of a tragic spin on this, but the knife cuts both ways. Just as, one little onion and one little act of kindness and one little asking forgiveness for all makes the world a little bit better. So one little refusal also kind of cuts things in the other direction too. So good call out on that front. All right. Yeah. Feel free to keep the questions and the comments coming. Let me know how this reading is going for you. This is part 3. So we just got over the halfway point, and there's a lot more yet to go, but we covered so much. So let me know what else is on your mind as you've been reading, because your reading is different than mine. So let's see here. That's Alyosha's story. And Alyosha is ostensibly the hero of this novel, and that's why he's kind of the pivot point. And now we move into Mitya's side of things. And it's odd. I think he's just as much the hero of this story as Alyosha is. Alyosha, I mean, this book was originally supposed to be 2 parts. And so I think maybe his story was developed even more in the second half that Dostoevsky never got to write. But on this reading, I'm really sympathizing a lot more with Dmitri and seeing the parallels that he has with Zosima, seeing the parallels that he has in the plot itself. So anyway, we're coming into this part, and Dmitri has this harebrained scheme where he's going to go to Kuzma Samsonov, who is the guardian protector of Grushenka when she came to town to wait for this Polish officer for five years ago. She's been staying under his patronage at his place. And so Dmitri looks and says, this guy, he's the in to Grushenka. And if I'm going to get out of this engagement with Katya, maybe I don't even need to go take the money from my old man. Maybe I can just have him be my inroad, and I can have him give me Grushenka's hand. I can get his blessing. So Kuzma doesn't exactly give Dmitri what he wants, but he says that he can get money out of this guy named Lurcher, depending on your translation, or Lia Liagavi. Liagavi. I'm not very good at Russian, but that's his name in my translation. And essentially, Kuzma sends him on a wild goose chase, where he goes all the way out here to try and get this money out of a guy who just turns out to be a drunk peasant out in the middle of nowhere. And so he's frustrated because he's been played. He comes back into town and he has another harebrained scheme. He's going to go to Madame Kamakiev. Uh, Ka- Ka- Man, why am I blanking on her name right now? Holikov. Um, he's going to go to her house and he's going to ask her, to give him the money, just lend him the money that he needs in order to square things away with Katya so that he can run off with Grushenka. And there's this really interesting little thing in here where they're talking about jealousy. And we can see that there's this jealousy in his love. And she and Dmitri have this conversation where they kind of essentially say, what kind of love is jealous? What kind of, that's such an insecure kind of love, um, that you're jealous of your father. It means that you're insecure in your own love for this person. And so it doesn't bode well. But she makes all of these promises to him and says, oh, yeah, no, no, no. I know how I can make you stable. I know how you can get the money that will take care of all your problems. And Dmitri is on the edge of his seat. He's like, please give me the answer. This is what I need. And then she says, you should go to the mines. You should forget all of this. You should quit chasing after these small town girls. You should go off and go mining for gold. You get so much money. You have your pick of the litter. You could marry anyone instead of being in a love triangle with your father with one woman and your brother with another woman. Um, and Dimitri's not happy. He just wanted the money. He didn't want a real solution. He wanted a solution in the way that he was expecting to have it. And so he storms off. And he does two interesting things when he storms off from the Kokhlakov. Um, the first thing that he does is he pounds his chest and he says that he has a way. He wants them to know that he could have taken care of this. He could have done this on his own, which is interesting because he also does this twice with Alyosha. And we're left to wonder, what is this pounding on the chest thing? And it'll come out later. But the other thing that he does is that he's talking with one of the Kokhlakov servants, and before he leaves, he just grabs a pestle. And it's a rather random, sporadic thing. Why would he grab a pestle from a mortar before going somewhere? When a guy is when he's so worked up and he's so angry and all of this, someone grabbing a blunt object like that, it raises a few eyebrows. What's he going to do with that? This should also raise some eyebrows because maybe you were listening when Smerdyakov was playing guitar for that Maria uh, Kondievna, I think was her name, but her name was Maria in any case. And he said that he's really scared of Dmitri. Things are getting really bad. He Twice Dmitri has threatened to kill this Smerdyakov, and he mentions that Dmitri said he was going to grind me in a mortar. So it's interesting that early on, almost like, again, think of the mountain analogy. I'll get the prop back for a second. So when Smerdyakov is talking to Alyosha, he mentions that Dmitri said, I'm going to grind you in a mortar. And then on the other side, he grabs a pestle, a brass pestle, before he goes off in a very agitated state to confront his father, or we don't know what he's going to do. But Dostoevsky set up, one thing that he might do with a mortar, he might grind Smerdyakov. Um, so then, where does he go with that pestle? We have a chapter entitled "In the Dark," and Dmitri and his pestle jumps over the fence of his father's house. He does the secret knock that Smerdyakov told him about. And then his dad puts his head out the door, wondering, "Are you there, my love? Are you there, Grushenka?" And I'll just read what we have here. The old man leaned almost all the way out the window, looking to the right in the direction of the garden gate, peering into the darkness. In another second, he would surely run to open the door, waiting for any answer from Grushenka. Mitya watched from the side and did not move. The whole of the old man's profile, which was so loathsome, the whole of his drooping Adam's apple, his hooked nose, smiling in sweet expectation, his lips, all was brightly lit from the left by the slanting light of the lamp shining in the room. Terrible, furious anger suddenly boiled up in Mitya's heart. There he was, his rival, his tormentor, the tormentor of his life. It was a surge of that same sudden, vengeful, and furious anger of which he had spoken as if in anticipation to Alyosha during their conversation in the gazebo 4 days earlier, in response to Alyosha's question, "How can you say you will kill father?" I don't know, he had said then. Maybe I won't kill him, and maybe I will. I'm afraid that his face, at that moment, will suddenly become hateful to me. I hate his Adam's apple. I hate his nose. I hate his eyes, his shameful sneer. I feel a personal loathing. I'm afraid of that I might not be able to help myself. The personal loathing was increasing unbearably. Mitya was beside himself, and suddenly he snatched up the brass pestle from his pocket. And Dostoevsky gives us nothing. The next phrase is, "God was watching over me then," Mitya used to say afterwards. And then the story continues from there. Now, it's a trope that we see in Anna Karenina as well, that when a significant moment in the plot happens, the author omits the action. Um, Maybe it's because he doesn't think his words could do it justice. Maybe he thinks it's better to let our imagination fill in the blanks. Maybe it's more terrible if parts of our imagination conjure up the violent scene, that we have that inside of ourselves. But in any case, I think it's interesting that Dostoevsky entitled this chapter "In the Dark." And here he literally leaves us in the dark about what happened at that moment. Did Dmitri kill his dad? Did his loathsome profile make him finally kill the father he hated so much? What does it mean that God was watching over me then? Because you decided to run away instead of go through with it? Because you were God's justice, taking a person that was really loathsome and no one liked anyway? You were doing the world a favor by removing him from the world? What does this mean? I don't know. We're in the dark. And I think that's part of the genius of Dostoevsky. Now, at this point, I'm going to leave you to believe what you want happened in the dark. Because as the Mitya story continues, he will defend his innocence and say that he didn't do this. But obviously, there's a dead father on the ground there. There's a bunch of threats that Dmitri has been making the whole time. There was the motive, there was the means, there was the opportunity. He had everything he needed to follow through with that. And again, maybe we wouldn't even blame him. Um, but on the other hand, it, This is a point in the story where you can either go along with Dostoevsky and let him explore something, or many people will look at this and say, that is so easy. He killed his dad. Let's just stop reading right now. We all know this story. Um, I think if that's what you believe, you're going to miss out on a whole lot. And trust me, a lot of people give up right around this part in the story. They don't want to follow him to Makore. They don't want to follow him through the courts. They don't want to do all that kind of stuff. Um, but I think you're going to learn a whole lot more if you go along with it. So I think another way that it's helpful to look at this is on the way up, we had your normal kind of story. We had a normal family drama that happens. But from this point on, it's more helpful to look at this story as a murder mystery. If you read Agatha Christie, if you read Sherlock Holmes, if you love watching British murder mysteries as much as I do, you'll know that what always happens is you have a murder or a death that's the inciting incident. And then the rest of the story is about unpacking what happened. How did this come about? Who did it? And then at the end of the story of a murder mystery, you get justice. Um, the killer is identified, justice is restored, and that's how a good murder mystery works. Ironically, this is also how the Bible works, where in the beginning you have, the snake who causes, the death of humanity by telling them, like, this is what you need to do. And then they create, this great evil. And then the whole story goes on until the end, where we have a final judgment. So you start with, an evil action and then unpacking and identifying what was going on there. And then you arrive at a final judgment. That's how the Bible works. And that's how murder mysteries work. And that's how the second half of the Brothers Karamazov works. So put on your head as a murder mystery, and I think you're going to get a lot more out of this. And in fact, I think it might even be interesting, as an aside, to take a handful of people that have never read the story and then just drop them in at this point and say, hey, this guy came up and the father's dead, and we got to try and figure out who it is. So unfortunately, I've read the book a few times already, so I cannot do this myself. But if you know anyone who hasn't read it, that might be a fun experiment to try. So tell me what you think about that. If you got any more questions, if you have any more quotes that you want me to bring up, any interesting sections, gonna kind of figure out where I want to go next year. All right. So pretty soon thereafter, we have Dmitri starting to tell us his side of the story. And then, let's see. Peter Ilyich, he asks him, like, did you kill somebody? He just flat out asks him. And this is Dmitri's answer. We made peace. We had a fight. Then we made peace somewhere. We parted friends. Some fool. He's forgiven me. Surely he's forgiven me by now. If he'd gotten up, he would have forgiven me. Mitya suddenly winked. Only, devil take him. Do you hear, Peter Ilyich? Devil take him. Never mind. No more. Not now. So, who forgave him exactly? Did his father forgive him? Well, we learned that as he was on his way out, he beat up another old man. Or should I say another? He beat up one old man for sure. And that guy was Grigory, the servant. the servant who raised him. And so it's interesting what Dmitri says here. He's like, "Oh no!" Like he is so racked with guilt because as he was leaving, you know, he took that pestle and he beat Grigory over the head, and he thought that he killed him there. He left him in a pool of blood. He threw the pestle away. He ran away. He thought for sure Grigory was dead, and I just think it's so funny that they were like, "Wait, well, hold on. What do you mean you killed him?" And he's alive, and he says, "Oh, good. I'm so glad I'm alive. I never wanted to kill him. He was like a father to me." And it's ironic because this whole thing is about the death of his actual father, not his servant dad, adoptive father. Um, but so he doesn't know that until the police show up later, and we should probably get to the McQuarrie. I believe I'm pronouncing that right. The excursion that he went on, because again, this is a part that parallels. So as we're coming down the mountain, on the way up, we had him mention that he went to Macquarie with Grushenka, and here he learns that her officer had come back and that they were meeting at Macquarie. And so he goes and he orders a box of champagne and pate and everything just like last time. He wanted the same party that he blew all his money on in the first place that caused this problem. So here's our parallelism. Before, we only overheard the story of him blowing all this money on a trip with Grushenka, and now we're actually going to see it happen again. So he he uh, pawns his pistols to get some extra money. He gets all of the stuffs that he needs for the party. He hires a driver named Andre to take him there, and he's going to find his love, Grushenka. He's putting Grigory and his dad and all the drama there behind him, and he's going to go and win her from her current man, the one that she's been waiting for and holding out for 5 years since she ended up in this town. She said she'd wait for this Polish officer, and now his wife has died or he left her, and he responded and he says, "All right, meet me here. Let's meet and talk about our future." And Dmitri takes it upon himself to crash that party. And if anyone can crash a party, it's definitely Dmitri. So when he's on his way, he has this interesting question. Um, First of all, he's covered in blood. Ostensibly, it's Grigory's blood. He just says it's the old man's blood. Um, and he's racked with guilt about killing this father figure. And then he asked the driver, Andre, um, "Will I go to hell or not? What do you think?" And he says, "I don't know, my dear. It depends on you, because you see, sir, when the Son of God was crucified on the cross and died, when he went straight from the cross to hell and freed all the sinners suffering there, and hell groaned because it thought it wouldn't have any more sinners coming, the Lord said to hell, 'Do not groan, O hell, for all kinds of mighty ones, rulers, great judges, and rich men will come to you from all parts, and you will be as full as ever unto ages and ages, until the time that I come again.'" That's right. That's what he said. Popular legend, splendid. And uh, then Andre responds, "That's who hell is meant for, sir. And you, sir, are just like a little child to us. Look at you. You're Though you're one to get angry, sir, the Lord will forgive you for your simple heart." And then he goes on, but Mitya did not hear. He was frantically praying, whispering wildly to himself. Now we get to hear Dmitri's prayer. "Lord, take me in all my lawlessness, but do not judge me. Let me pass without your judgment. Do not judge me, for I have condemned myself. Do not judge me, for I love you, Lord. I am loathsome, and I love you. If you send me to hell, even there I will love you. And from there I will cry that I love you unto the ages of ages. But let me also finish with loving. Finish here and now with loving, for 5 hours only, until your hot ray. For I love the queen of my soul. I love her and cannot not love her. You see all of me. I will gallop up. I will fall down before her. You are right to pass by me. Farewell, and forget your victim. Never trouble yourself. So he has some guilt about what he did back at his father's house, but he wants to be forgiven. He wants to be reconciled. He wants to wipe the blood literally off him and to start this new life. So he goes to crash this party with a Polish officer. And what ensues is an absolute delirium. Um, and Dostoevsky uses the word even like an orgy ensues. He hires some klezmer musicians to play a bunch of music. One of the singers comes out wearing a bear costume. Everyone's drunk. He is so drunk. Grushenka is drunk. Again, he has a harebrained scheme to, you know, get this Polish officer. He's like, maybe I can bribe him um, to leave Grushenka alone from me. And Grushenka is just so offended that her lover, who she was waiting for 5 years, is even talking to him and entertaining this idea. And meanwhile, all this crazy stuff is happening. Dmitri, he's a guy who's got nothing to lose. He's willing to kill himself in the morning. If it's for what he's done, if it's because he has no future with Grushenka, he's so self-loathing. He doesn't have any options. He's got nothing to lose. He's willing to kill himself. And so he's just going for broke. And ironically, uh, Grushenka is kind of into it. In my family, we call it Shawshanking. At the end of the Shawshank Redemption, when Red comes up for parole, he always says, I'm a reformed member of society. I learned my lesson. You throw me out there, you'll never see me again. And he always gets put back in the slammer. But once his friend is gone and he's got nothing to lose and he sees that this isn't going anywhere, he just says, I'm as bad as the day that I walked in here. I'm not rehabilitated. I got nothing to lose. So you can just sign your papers and walk away. That's the kind of bravado. That's the kind of reckless abandonment that Dmitri is coming into this situation. He's ready to Shawshank Grushenka because he's got nothing left to lose. And it works for him. She's not impressed with this old, dusty Polish officer that was not as good as her idea. And then she says Dmitri swoops in like a falcon, and he's more her speed. And let's see here. Yeah, they're praying. Yeah, tomorrow the convent, but today we'll dance. I want to be naughty, good people. What of it? God will forgive. If I were God, I'd forgive all people. My dear sinners, from now on, I forgive you all. And I'll go and ask forgiveness. Forgive me, good people. I'm a foolish woman. That's that. I'm a beast. That's what. I want to pray. I gave an onion. Wicked as I am, I want to pray. Mitya, let them dance. Don't interfere. Everyone in the world is good. Every one of them. The world is a good place. We may be bad, but the world is a good place. We're bad and good, both bad and good. Now, so that was Grushenka. And whether or not that was coming out of her piety or her drunkenness, we see again kind of this forgiveness of all thing come back in this drunken reverie. That everyone will be forgiven. God will forgive all of us. Let's just have tonight. But pretty soon, the police come and they say that they're here to arrest Dmitri for the death of his father. So that's how the party ends and the next part of the story begins. So let me know if you have any more questions on Mitya. Let me know if you have any questions on where we're going next. Any other comments? So the next section that we have is called the preliminary investigation. And again, I said this is a great way to read the second half as a mystery novel. So it started off with the death of a father. We have this mysterious Dmitri character walking around with stacks of bloodied money and he's covered in blood all over his face. He orders a whole bunch of champagne and snacks and stuff to go have this wild party out of nowhere, and they do have it. Um, and now we're into an investigation. As the story will go on, we will have, a judgment scene. But yeah, we're in the throes of a mystery novel right now. And so the start of Perhotin, I believe this is Pyotr Ilyich Perhotin. So this is the guy who Dmitri was pawning his pistols with to get a little money. And he was like, wait, this is a little odd, especially when Dmitri comes back and he's got the money, but he's all bloody. What's going on here? So this is where the story breaks chronology and we kind of go back in the past. This is where a lot of that stuff is filled in. One thing I want to call your attention to is we have a chapter here called Alarm. And we see that what was the alarm that was sounded? Well, the alarm that was sounded was Smerdyakov crying in the middle of the night. It was an epileptic fit of his that he's used to having, and that this woke up Grigory, and it woke up Marfa. So he had an epileptic episode. He cried out. He woke them up, and then Grigory went and saw Dmitri escaping. He got into an altercation with Dmitri. Dmitri hit him over the head and ran away. What Dmitri doesn't know is that the old man Grigory survived the altercation. But it's interesting that the alarm here is Smerdyakov, the same Smerdyakov that taught Dmitri the knocks on the door, the same Dmitri that should have been essentially in an epileptic coma. He's been in this coma fit since Ivan went away. And the doctor is like, it's a little odd that he's been, in this condition for so long. Usually this is an unwarranted case. And all the doctors, slap him on the back and say, wow, you did a new discovery for science. Like, way to find an interesting condition here. But I think it's also a little bit suspicious. But what do we do next? So now we see, that suspicions were raised with Peter Ilyich, seeing Dmitri, and we put together what was happening with the servants. Then we see, the alarm is sounded. And now we come across this section of threes, where Dmitri has three torments. I'll bring my prop back again for this one. So on the way up, we had the death of the father, right? And now on the way down, we have another death of the father. As we move down, we have Dmitri doing three things. Before, he was having his 3 drunken confessions to Alyosha, and now he has his 3 interrogations, his 3 torments with the police that show up to him and say, where were you this day? What was going on? Just like his 3 drunken confessions that he had on the way up, on the way down, he doesn't really do a good job of getting things off his chest. He doesn't do a good job of confessing and absolving and exonerating himself. So there's a parallelism right there. And so he's saying that he's not guilty the whole time. Not of his father's blood, but maybe the blood of Grigory. And this is where he says, of course I didn't want to kill him. He's like a father to me. And it's like, well, this whole situation is about the death of your actual father. So there's a little bit of irony throughout these. Through the entire book. It's a very ironic book. One other thing I wanted to call out here is these 3 torments that are here. In my translation, they're called the 3 torments, but before that, it's called it's called the soul's journey through torments, and then it goes through the three interrogation torments. Um, Another thing inside of Russian spirituality is called the toll houses, which are after the soul dies, it goes through a series of toll houses that are meant to purge the soul or challenge the soul after death, um, so that it might undergo this purgation of its worldly life and then move on to its heavenly life. Um, and these are trials that happen on the way. These are tolls that need to be paid. Um, you can look into it. There's some interesting. Um, it, it depends on who you talk to about how official this is. It's not exactly like a Catholic purgatory, but it kind of works like one. So I think that that's an illusion that that Dostoevsky is making here, is that Dmitri is being purged of something during this time. Um, so yes, he's saying that he's not guilty of his father's, and yet he does a terrible job of proving his innocence. Um, and this whole thing, again, it's kind of the entire novel is a question about whether or not anyone can prove their innocence. Um, if everyone is supposed to be guilty of all on behalf of all, to take the sins of all unto themselves, who could ever be expected to pay or to prove their innocence? Definitely not Dmitri. He's making it very hard for anyone to believe that he's innocent of anything. And what's interesting is when the police show up and they say, you're guilty of his father's death, he's like, I'm not guilty of that blood. And then Grushenka, once again, comes out of nowhere, says, it's me, the cursed one. I am guilty, she said in a heartrending howl, all in tears, stretching her arms out to everyone. It's because of me that he killed him. I tormented him and drove him to it. I tormented that poor old dead man too, out of spite, and drove things to this. I am the guilty one. First and most of all, I am the guilty one. And so again, we see that Grushenka uh, unexpectedly is articulating the Zosiman philosophy on this. She's willing to take the sins of all. Even Dmitri, he's like, I'll take some of my sins, but not all. But she is willing to say, no, it's me. I'm responsible for this whole mess. And she says, judge us together, punish us together. I'll go with him now, even to execution. So yeah, Dmitri, I think one telling thing during this whole thing is he said that the police was like, how did you, I mean, you told everyone that you're going to kill him. Um, and he said, no, I wasn't going to. I lied. I just lied and everyone followed me. And I think that's such a telling, chilling kind of thing that, yeah, all it takes is for you to lie and people are willing to believe the worst. So just give them that and they'll take it. All right. So we're coming up on the end here. So any other questions on part 3 that you guys have? I'll mention also in here that I've been casting a lot of shade on Smirtikov. And it comes up here. They ask him like, wait, hold on. Who taught you about the knocks on the doors and how to get over the fence? And Dmitri said, oh, well, it was Smirtikov. And they're like, so did Smirtikov kill him? And Dmitri says, no, of course not Smirtikov. He's too cowardly. So here we see that even someone who could be thrown under the bus, um, given the option, Dmitri didn't do that. He still wasn't going to, just pass off on someone else because it was convenient and it could exonerate him. So, yes, here's the line I was looking for. Not dozens. You've gotten hundreds of testimonies. 200 testimonies. 200 people heard it. 1,000 people heard it. Mitya is talking about. Everyone heard him saying he's going to kill his dad in the tavern. Everyone heard him say how he was going to do it. And then the police say, well, you see, sir, everyone says it. Does the word everyone mean anything to you? And Dmitri said, it means nothing. I lied, and everyone started lying after me. So again, this is kind of like, the point that Peyton brought up earlier, that the onion principle works the other way. Sometimes just someone doing one little bit of truth, one little bit of kindness, is good for everyone. But also, it only takes one lie for everyone else to be following a lie. So let me scroll down here, get caught up. All right. So now we're coming up on the end here. Dimitri's not given anyone a convincing argument in his favor. He has not proven his innocence to anyone. If anything, he's only incriminated himself over and over again during his 3 trials or his 3 ordeals or 3 torments, depending on your translation. And so it's decided that we have to take him away. We don't have any other suspect. This seems like an open and shut case. And so he says, farewell and forgive God's people. Mitya suddenly cried out to them from the cart. And you forgive us too. 2 or 3 other voices were heard. Now, I think it was interesting, that we're reading this section. I read it at the beginning of Lent here. And another part of Orthodox spirituality that you might not know is that in the beginning of Lent, we have a thing called the rite of mutual forgiveness. And in the rite of mutual forgiveness, everyone goes up to everyone else and says, forgive me, a sinner. And then the response is, God forgives and I forgive. And so it's interesting that we have kind of this antiphonal thing where he says, forgive me. And then people respond, and you forgive us, which I was reading this during the beginning of Lent, and it was interesting to see that antiphonal approach show back. So, and then that brings us up, to the end of part 3. Mitya's taken away. We've started to fill in a few blanks on the way down the mountain. There's still some other ones, namely, Ivan's evil conversations, some things with schoolboys, and it's all going to be filled in with part 4 coming up next. So let me know if you have any other questions before we sign off for this, because I know that you all have more reading to get to. But until then, I just want to point out also that we have a Zoom call on Saturday, March 28th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so that's a Zoom call. I send the link out the week of, and then you can put it on your calendars. And then that way we can chat face to face about Dostoevsky, about anything else I've been publishing on the blog, anything else that you've been reading. So if you want to join a face to face conversation, I always love meeting you guys and having that. So that will be, March 28th at 11 Eastern Standard Time. So any other questions before we sign off? And for those of you that also didn't join early on, I teased what our next book reads are going to be. So after we finish The Brothers Karamazov, we're going to do Nietzsche's Thus Spake Zarathustra. And it's a short little book full of really cool images, really well written, very exciting, and a lot of profound ideas that really work well kind of with Dostoevsky. Sometimes they play well in opposition to Dostoevsky, and sometimes they surprisingly echo some of his ideas. So we'll do that for a month or two to kick off summer. And then we'll move into Middlemarch, the philosophical Jane Austen, um, George Eliot herself, and then move on to Till We Have Faces after that. So, yeah, if I don't see you before then or hear from you, those are the next books that we're going to do. And you'll see an announcement post come out about those. So, it seems like a good time to sign off and look forward to seeing you guys next month. It's also going to be on the second Monday of the month. I forget which day that is in April, but then that's when we're going to wrap things up and cover part 4 of the Brothers Karamazov, and get to the end and see how it all wraps up. So I'm looking forward to that next conversation and more books after that. Keep your eyes peeled. More companion essays are coming for each of these books so that you can get caught up with those ideas at your leisure. And I'll talk to you then. All right. Thanks for joining me tonight, everyone. See ya.